viewers, M&E community. Once again, this is Mkhopana Ramasubana coming live from Johannesburg for Decolonization Conversations, ... Today, I'm fortunate to be sitting with a very good friend of mine, Professor Nedson Pophiwa. We're going to have a conversation around decoloniality and his work in the academia. And as an historian, he will share a little bit about himself. I would like you to introduce you to the viewers. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, awesome. Would you tell the viewers a little bit about yourself and what you do?
All right. Sounds like a job interview question, but and one that is never easy to answer. Actually,
Yeah.
I think in my current role, I play the role of an associate professor at University of Johannesburg, and in that space, I teach development studies, and it's something that is informed by my background in economic history, in terms of my academic qualifications. And then it also ties in with my own work experience over the years. And M&E then becomes one of just the tools. At this stage where I am, it's a tool. It's no longer a discipline. And it's no longer just the main aspect, but it's about we're now bringing it into the space. Especially how do we manage development? And that's where M&E then comes in. But and I think the biggest advantage I have now is that teaching undergraduates means you're trying to shape minds. And so that gives me an opportunity to go back to the early works of Walter Rodney and many other champions of African history. And that in itself is a good starting point for anybody who wants to understand the trajectory from when we started with Ghana gaining independence for the first time in Africa up until South Africa, 1994, post-apartheid, the end of apartheid. So it's, I would say that's in a nutshell how I would explain the nature of work I've been doing over the years.
Amazing. I mean, I think I do agree with you around M&E as an approach, not necessarily the alpha and the omega. And at times, we as professionals, we want to make it as if it supersedes everything. But how do you comfort those, or maybe it's those who say M&E is the ultimate, M&E is a panacea? I mean, there's those of us in the fraternity who have that view. What would you say to them?
I think it's just it simply means I think it takes me back to when I used to teach managing M&E at postgraduate diploma level, and I used to say we have generalists and we've got specialists. And for me, generalists will be, even myself, I would call myself a generalist. If we are evaluating an agriculture project, I bring in the M&E component, but I do not know anything about the actual agricultural content that we are evaluating. Now, you then have somebody who's a specialist in agriculture, but they have then acquired M&E as a qualification or as an experience over the years. Our approach obviously will differ. I am generalist in that I am coming in to apply M&E, but he's a specialist in agriculture with an M&E background. So now, if I come to your own question, I will then say, what does it mean for somebody who views, like you're saying, M&E as not necessarily alpha and omega, but M&E as something that supersedes everything else? I would say it really depends on their point of entry. If they are coming in to inform right from the onset of an intervention, and informing it with the theory of change and all the things that are required from an M&E perspective, then it becomes, that. But if you're coming in the middle to evaluate maybe implementation or to evaluate an end of term, then you cannot have those claims to, you would need to also acknowledge that you were not even there in the conceptualization.
In the beginning,
and hence some of the best evaluations have been done retrospectively. Even formulating a theory of change 8 years into an intervention. So I would say they have a leg to stand on, but I think there's need to be quite diverse, because M&E, if you really want it to be the onset, I mean, to be the ultimate, then you have to start from the conceptualization of an intervention or a policy or a program.
Yeah, you as a historian, you touched a little bit about, post-independence. You took us to Accra, the 1960 era, of Africa. and its pathways. And I mean, if we try to move the conversation towards more of the transformation in evaluation, there's been a discourse around Africans linking it to post-independence in terms of how would evaluation look like, in an evaluation setting, in an African setting. And I think you have been involved to publish some of the papers around that. What is your assessment in terms of that type of a conversation? Where do you think it is now? Where does it need to be improved, and where do you think it's going?
Yeah, I think if you are to take the current status quo, which I was hoping I would really do a more in-depth study into it, I would say where funding has been provided, especially with the purposes of perhaps developing national evaluation systems.
Yeah.
The key champions of that space wouldn't necessarily bring in transformative approaches, or if they do, they would at least be the ones funding them.
Yeah.
So there are those, tensions around
yeah,
whether that will be full transformation. But if you look at it I think transformative approaches can only be bottom up. So that means that I'm not going to say I'm expecting it in a World Bank project or I'm expecting it in a certain funder's project. I should be able to say we are developing this knowledge and these tools and these approaches, but from also bottom up. Yeah. So if it's grassroots kind of work and we're trying to transform at that level, because trying to convince a funder is one, not unless the funder says, we are here to fund transformative approaches, but it carries a catch to it. Because I also have, because I've been teaching development management, which is a subset of development studies, I came across very fascinating information, which was even talking about the aspect of log frames and those kinds of tools. They were already being applied in the 60s.
Yeah.
And those tools, in fact, from the Second World War.
Yeah.
So those tools, because they were being applied at that time, the idea was what was called colonial administration. And so the next phase after that, they said, we can't continue calling it colonial administration because we're now in the post-colonial era. Then it becomes development administration. Then it becomes development management. Because the word administration is quite limiting. So the tools that were being used to, like log frames, to log frame analysis and all that, they carried over a linear understanding of how development works. And this is how a colonial official saw Africans when he was trying to develop, even if he's looking at Mamelodi or Harankoa, he would look at it and say, Africans need programs like this. Now, inputs, outputs, outcomes in that kind of fashion. Now, the logical framework analysis, although we've shifted now, looking at theories of change and things like that, which I don't want to get into, what still remains that the core foundation of what we have as those tools was already being used in colonial administration, which then becomes development administration and then development management. So it means unbundling or decoupling is probably a very ambitious task. But some say let's work with the infrastructure the way it is, but we change it to appeal. And that's where some say, you can transform the interior basically and make it a bit more perhaps approachable or maybe perhaps a bit more amenable to those audiences that want to listen to it. So I think that we're dealing with something that has historical roots, and we're dealing with very embedded approaches that become difficult. And I think my only take is that then bottom up is probably the best way to do it, with a lot of insights and investment in researching the best approaches that can be there. But responding to terms of reference, you will always...
You wouldn't be innovative as you want to.
You would not be as innovative as you want to be.
Because people want to see what they're expecting. And if you say anything different, they would have the impression that you misunderstood their scope and the terms of reference. What is I think we spoke partially about the consequence of colonization. Because if you read colleagues like Bantu, they accuse colonization to have taken a subtle that it's not necessarily has not necessarily ended, but it is more subtle it is more complex, so for me, then the question is, because you did say that, and I mean, even if those who critique the new public management construct, they oftentimes say that it was also developed for purposes of driving aid. Its intention was really to manage their own aid. I mean, the IFIs, the Oral Bank, and many other funders, meaning that it was not necessarily innocent, and it continues to be bottom up, top down, so to speak. So for the question I have for me is, I mean, the Made in Africa evaluation, it's similar to other discourses around the higher education sector on decolonization, has been one of the conversations that the leading thinkers in MNE have been trying to champion. So what do you think? Is this an answer? Is this activism? What is this? Is it what is your understanding of it?
Well, I haven't thought of it as activism. I think to call it activism could also simply mean it carries some reactionary approaches to it. And that's where, in some circles where I sit, the decolonization discourse is treated with caution. And one of the reasons is because the shallow definitions of it are exactly thinking that it's about unbundling or decoupling from colonial or neo-colonial approaches. And yet some of it has been really about removing those things that have not been ideal for the Africans. Yes, which I think is more approachable, palatable to other audiences, that we're not saying it then means we stop or we fight back against things that have been existing, but rather we're taking the good that remains, that needs to be there, but also removing those aspects. For example, silencing of African voices in the material that we read. And what is interesting is that even when you look at representation, right? I mean, students where I teach are likely to go on the website and look at the names of the academics, and they are likely to say, I want to go and speak to that professor about my problem, because they think that we relate on that basis, and they feel that I'm going to listen to them. And I remember a few months ago, I was one of the invited speakers at a graduation for artisans.
Okay.
A college in Pretoria asked me to come in and just make a motivational speech for the graduates. But amongst us, the speakers, was also one gentleman from TUT who's also an academic. But because he broke into Sepedi he gave his introductions in Sepedi, and he actually spoke to the audience first in Sepedi for about a good 2-3 minutes. I remember that the closing remarks from one of the parents, was that I'm overjoyed with tears to see a doctor from my own community. It doesn't mean that she's also from, let's say, Skukune or whatever, but you could tell she was overjoyed. And for me, it was representation matters. And so it's the same thing with our approaches. If we are not seeing the ability of our approaches to change or to relate to the people, then we are missing the whole point. I've been trying to read into decolonization, and I think I get a lot of mixed signals. And I think it gets even more diluted when also other non-Africans, if there's such a thing, who then also participate quite heavily in the discourse and also drive the discourse. So you ask yourself, is it because we are bogged down in the teaching and learning aspects, and then we don't have time to also be the critical thinkers?
Are you uncomfortable with those you refer as non-African contributing to the discourse on decolonization?
It's an observation I'm making.
Okay.
And it's also debates we have had. And I'll explain in what context. In African studies, particularly when you go to area studies, and you then hear that the dictionary for Shona, Chichewa, or Sepedi was written by a Catholic priest. Right? Or the Bible versions of all those languages were written by Catholic priests, as well as hymns and those kinds of things. you can meet halfway with that for 1925 or 1922 or 1870 something. But in 2025, those questions will arise around who also should be the ones running
knowledge holders.
the knowledge holders.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
So I'm not directly answering your question, but
I
I'm
get
bringing
you.
it from that perspective that there comes a time when the authorities or the authors have to be those who also have that intimate knowledge of it, lived experience of it. It doesn't negate the efforts of those who are there.
Yeah.
Because we are free also to go and study American culture. And really do field work in the Bronx or somewhere else in the US. We should be able to do that. In actual sense, Donald Trump is teaching us that we need to understand America better, for example. You know. So I would say that it's all about, you know, making sure that in as much as others who are outside a specific, it could be racial or even ethnic, there still needs to be, you know, those who are in that ethnic group to understand and study themselves as well, and be the also competitive leading authors. I just feel that has been one of our weak points on the continent.
Yeah, and I think part of what you raised on relatability, that there's some things that are unexplainable. You know, they're inherent in you as a person, and I think they also create. That's why we say even in research there's biases because of that type of upbringing or training that another person might not necessarily. That's why I'm saying they're unexplainable. Like for instance, in instances where a person, when you do research, people do expressions, you'll find that if you use English, that might not be captured correctly. But that's something that is meaningful to the community that you are working. You're working within, even if you have translation, but it's not necessarily the same thing. The meaning sort of gets diluted. So maybe let's talk a little bit about you made an observation around decoloniality that at times it seems to, and there's a guy who wrote a paper from UJ, by the way, I just forgot his name, who was critiquing decolonization, Nebo Bagel and the rest of them. What do you think is there's those who say we need practical tools, because part of the criticism is that you have theorized quite a lot. So we need something practical, something tangible that I can apply within. If there's a log frame, we need something that's decolonized, that's more practical than what you tell me about what it means. Would you say that's maybe one of the approaches that we need to venture into?
It's a tough one, because when I wear M&E thinking cap, I get a bit disillusioned. If I'm speaking of disciplines like history, African history in particular, these discussions we're having now, we already had in the 70s. Right before we were born, people had already debated what is the method. And oral history, for it to gain its prominence where it is today. I was just in an oral history conference recently. The exact things we're talking about, even capturing that, he sighed, he breathed a bit after I asked him to explain his experience with the war or something like that. Those notions of, you know, how people breathe in or breathe out. Because remember, there are people who tell you that once you hear a Mosotho man breathing like this, it means this. So those things are captured in a transcript, but they're captured in a recording, but not the transcript. The transcript captures the words. Now, coming to what you're saying, I would say it's very difficult when it comes to many. Are we decolonizing right to the level of? Does it mean decolonizing right to the level of tools such as log frames? Or it means the thinking that we put into the evaluations we're doing has already had that thinking mindset. If you look at gender activists, and I'm working on thin ice here, but when we were doing a project for World Food Program on school nutrition programs, a gender expert listened to my presentation And I said that one of the benefits of the school feeding program is that the parents go and cook at the school where their children are learning. And I said it also means that the mothers learn new recipes for cooking. And a gender specialist said, thank you for that point, but you are undermining just one simple thing, that if women cook at school for their children, they are doing it for their love as mothers. But once you take men or our fathers to cook at the school, you will hear someone saying they need an allowance or a thank you something. So she was saying that free labor at home, free labor at the school, so that we will never monetize the labor of women. And as a gender specialist, she was listening to my presentation. What does a decolonial thinker also have to do when they listen to the same presentation? They will also need to see those things that do not conform or that not align with the decolonial thinking, and then say, you need to fix this part of your report. So the gender specialist knows exactly how to pick when you are not going. So for me, an evaluation specialist shouldn't necessarily then convert everything to the granular point of a log frame. But at least can they, when they read that log frame, pick up those areas where they can see that we are replicating perhaps westernized ways of thinking, and we are not necessarily addressing issues that are relevant to our context. Then I can say it's a level we can go in.
Yeah, but I think for me, maybe we should speak to how does the evaluation specialist be as competent as the gender expert? If you look at the journey, who espouses decolonization theory, I mean, earlier on when you talked about oral history, we appreciate oral history as part of data collection now, because somebody said this, somebody provide guidelines on this. Would you say there's sufficient guidelines in terms of what, I mean, for instance, maybe there's a simplified way as a gender specialist to say, this is, 101, and then you get to an advance. Maybe in our conversation, we need things that are easier for people to be able to be empowered than, and I still go back to my point that I feel like we've theorized quite a lot. And when I talked about the practicalities, I was talking to issues that you're raising, that how do we empower other specialists to say, I just want a quick induction on this thing. Where do I go? And I find that not to be easily available, and maybe that's where we should take it. And then talk to me about your orientation of decolonization into the classroom. You said earlier you're nurturing young minds. What is the ultimate goal for you? I mean, if you look at this conversation, it's long older than all of us, but what would be something that would make you, as an old man seated somewhere there, looking at your students, what would be something that pleases you?
So again, it goes back to ensuring that my students fully understand, firstly, they need to understand what could be not necessarily the opposite of decolonial thinking, but at least what could be Western ways of knowing and thinking around Africa itself, right? So firstly, we have got the extreme views that are from the likes of Conrad, who were talking about there's no history in Africa. The only history in Africa is of Europeans conquering Africa, right? So we can move away from those, but we also go to those that have been quite well documented, but also misrepresenting, even unknowingly. So for me, a good starting point is to empower my students to be able to identify what is actually something that speaks to, that has been decolonized in its thinking out of it. But one thing I'll caution is that, unfortunately, the undergraduate student that we are getting in the university has also not been exposed to any of this in their high school years. So my students are trying to respond to an essay question, and they come for consultation. And one of them says, colonialism brought us roads, it brought us clinics. And then I'm not at least old school like my own lecturer who would have banged the desk and said, get out of my office now, right? So I'm listening to Buhle telling me that colonialism brought us schools and the like, and there is my work cut out for me.
Yeah.
I need to show Buhle that this is where she's getting it wrong.
Yeah.
But I can't drill it down like my own literature,
exactly.
my own lecturer
Yeah.
who used to drill in information. I have to make them do deductive reasoning.
Yeah.
That, okay, Prof has given us this, and this is what we've read, and then they can be able to tell now that this is the kind of literature we read.
Yeah.
So part of it is to include already readings that allow them to learn that way.
Yeah.
And also to appreciate the African story. Yeah. And also for them to be able to get the right tools. So I see that they also don't like reading very heavy texts.
Heavy, of course.
So it's a dilemma because I read Walter Rodney's How Europe Underdeveloped Africa cover to cover, but my students will never go that route. Yeah. So they make life difficult for me because they don't want to go the same route as me. But at least I find snippets.
Yeah. Or they can watch the YouTube videos.
Yeah, and I extract it for them. Yes. But an empowered student for me will be a student who is now able to not fall so easily for certain text and say, yes, this is the absolute truth.
So maybe to sort of instill critical thinking, that you look at information, you analyze it again, and then you apply your mind. I think that's the benefit of education and knowledge.
Yeah.
And then for the evaluation community, I still know that you still teach some of the courses in evaluation. I think for me the question would be, what do you think of the current discourse in evaluation? Where do you think it's going? And what's your wish for this discourse?
Yeah. So I think the discourse is maturing when it comes to decolonization. And I think the role of even, again, funders such as MasterCard is also commendable, because they've allowed for, one, at the end of the day, they're sowing a seed.
Yeah.
The fact that it's them planting the money into the project is a good starting point. From there, you cannot stop the brain from thinking.
Yeah.
So we'll continue to have the discourse going on, even post the MasterCard Foundation funding that I've seen across the continent on issues of decolonization of M&E or evaluations.
Yeah.
Amongst evaluation community itself, I see that almost every discussion has some form of, talks about decolonization.
Yeah, true.
And which is what I appreciate the most. And you also see that African Evaluation Journal will rarely not have one issue or at least one article where someone is critiquing that. In fact, especially issue we had contributed to, I continue to get notifications that there's been someone who has cited the work.
That's good.
And some of them are citing the work not from M&E alone, but from other disciplines again. And that shows you that once your community starts being recognized in another sector, in another, like if sociologists start reading the work of evaluators, then we're doing something right as a community. And I'm also seeing that even journals such as JDME, which are not even African, they've also had a special decolonization issue as well.
I saw that.
So that means that the discourse of decolonization continues to grow.
Yeah.
And it also, I mean, when you look at the global sphere, then you look at in Australia and New Zealand,
Canada,
and those places where also again the discourse around that is happening. So I think we're in a good space, we're in a good footing. It doesn't necessarily maybe mean that we'll get radical shifts, but at least we have the knowledge and conversations going on.
Yeah. What is your wish for the discourse?
I know that this is a veiled question saying, do you think that we should be practical? And I have my own reasons why I left an environment like School of Governance, which seeks to mold graduates who go in the workplace and work. And because, one of the reasons was, besides all other reasons, one of the biggest reasons for me was because I got tired of us wanting to recommend things that we think the state should change.
Yeah.
Especially coming from a university, which all universities across the world, whether you're in wherever you are in the world, are just known to be more bureaucratic.
Yeah.
So if you're going to be bureaucrats yourselves, how are you then suggesting to the state how to change whatever it is to do? In fact, what you're only going to tell the state afterwards is you need to have this form which people will fill in. Yet the state is known for having too many forms for people to fill in.
Yeah.
Now, so I got a bit restless about working on policy issues. I still have to do them because of my sins having worked on it. But I'm keen on people producing knowledge. That knowledge will then be picked up by others who can package that knowledge for their own use. But for me, I am happy with people who are working on decolonization discourse a lot. Because somewhere they're going to crack it. They're going to find exactly where we need to plug it.
Yeah.
And the readings that will come across is going to mature. Just like, again, when Jan van Sina and other scholars were writing about oral traditions and oral history, those years that they debated that, those were largely intellectual discussions.
Exactly.
At some point, everybody then says, yes, oral history.
These guys are right.
Yes. And that's when they say, no, but we don't need written evidence.
Yeah.
Oral evidence can be.
Suffice.
Exactly. Yes. So we are going to get to a point where maybe a minimum requirement must be conscious of decolonial. Must be at least. So we'll get there, but for now I'm happy with. I've moved away completely from enforcing that whole. What are we learning from this? We are learning by reading what we're reading, and But that's the little controversies and the joys that I get from being in a faculty of humanities. We don't even have a recommendation section in our thesis. We just give our conclusions because no one is going to read our recommendations from a 95-page
report.
Exactly.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. I think it's been a lot of fun. I learned a lot, and I think I like your lens around. And I think the essence of what I'm getting from this conversation is your suggestion, and I think humble suggestion that let's learn from other disciplines. Other disciplines let's not rush ourselves. It seems to be in a hurried by, maybe because people from the global north are saying, where are your tools, where are your frameworks, and we feel pressured. I think what you seems to be suggesting is that let's have this conversation. Let's write about this discourse. It's okay to be confused along the way. It's okay to sound repetitive at some point, but like other disciplines, borrowing from oral history, we'll get to a stage where we start narrowing it down to what it means and how it works, at a practical level. And I think that's my wish also for the MNE community, that we heed to this clarion call. It has been a lot of fun to sit and have a chat with my good friend here, and I hope you guys have learned. Give us your feedback on the comment section. We look forward to engaging more with you. Look out for the next podcast recording. Thank you so much. Awesome.